Welcome to The Outlook, a podcast and video format brought to you by the Absolute Company. My name is Nils von Heijne, and as always, in this second episode, I have Bill Mehleisen with me. How are you doing, Bill?
Doing wonderful. Great to be with you again.
Good. Where are you today?
Where am I today? I am next to the Williamsburg Bridge in Brooklyn today. And so I'm staring at trains and cars go by across the bridge. If it gets a little bit loud in the background, that's what that is.
Beautiful. And I'm in my home just outside of Stockholm, where night is slowly falling, which this time of year means it's still pretty bright outside. But that means it might get a bit darker as we record this. So if you have audio challenges, I have some visual challenges, hoping we both and anyone joining us here can live with that.
Yes. Well, where should we begin?
Yeah, where should we begin? So the topic of this is that we basically just sit down and share what we notice is emerging through our respective perspectives on ourselves, the world, society, organizations, human beings. I guess you're representing North America in a sense, and I'm representing Europe. But that said, I think we just dip our toes into it from there. What is a topic or a trend or a shift or something that's been occupying your mind or being within your field, so to speak, in the past couple of weeks?
There's been a number of things that have really popped into, I guess, my purview of the past couple of weeks. So, in the context of organizations, I think one of the things that's been really prevalent here in the U.S. is how are organizations going to evolve as the sort of like paradigms and mental models collectively are evolving. So to say that more simply, I think we're continuing to shift out of the 19th century mechanistic, more hierarchical models, which worked for a period of time, and we're shifting into more networked ecosystem models. We see that in another, or most prevalent in blockchain projects and companies, where you have groups of individuals coming together who may or may not be forming a company, but they're participating in a network and creating value for a particular domain of expertise. And they're figuring out, how do we manage ownership? How do we manage financial sharing? How do we manage governance, information flow, decision making when we are participants in a community and a network? And so that, I think, is one of the big shifts that I don't know, that I'm sort of tapping into right now.
Interesting. And I'm seeing very similar things from my viewpoint. And what's coming up for me is I both see it in the blockchain space, which has really come to life again, or maybe we should say entered its next phase of entering the world.
Yeah.
I definitely see it there as well. And I see it in the communities of entrepreneurs and thought leaders, change makers that I'm lucky to sometimes hang out with. There's this, it seems we're in a phase of deep and very open exploration. That we're not fully into something new. We're moving there, but at the same time, to me, it feels as we've already left the station. Like the old system is slowly disappearing somewhere back there, and we're not really sure what we're heading into, but we're starting to get an idea of it.
100%. And it just occurred to me that the universe has decided to all give us a crash course on it by throwing COVID at people, and so organizations had to adopt more networked approaches. by necessity. And so we all just went through a trial run of, well, here's what it looks like to be in an organization that is not in one place, that's in many places. You sort of had on paper reporting lines, but they sort of broke down because, well, we're not in an office. I'm not near my boss. I'm just doing my work, and then I'm talking to people who I need to talk to in order to get the work done. So it's a more networked approach. It's a more stakeholder approach by necessity. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how, we're now starting to come out of that and go back to, well, I don't want to say go back to, go into being in person again. We're going into, a company getting an office and collecting in the same space again. And so I think it's going to be very interesting how we go into that next phase.
Very much so. I'm personally curious about stepping into those spaces again, because I personally haven't been in an office context in quite some time now. And I noticed that I feel kind of hesitant towards entering it. It's almost like going, first day of school in a way.
It's a great way to describe it.
Everyone grew a little bit, maybe everyone's different when you come back, and then everything is a little bit different and new, and potentially what I'm hoping for is that we'll see it with new eyes. We've had this opportunity to take a step away from the daily grind of things being as they always are, and now stepping into that space again with an entirely new shared experience with new tools and skills at hand, and potentially also with just simply new perspectives on what an office space is and what value it brings, why we're there, and how we're supposed to be using that, and also how we're supposed to be working together in this changing society that we all share.
I really do hope and think that it's going to be into something new. Sure, we'll carry forward some things from the old that we used to do, but I still and I think people will go through a period of like, okay, no more Zoom calls for a little while. Let's meet in person. But I very much can see sort of a hybrid approach where we'll navigate sort of the best of both, where we get in person when we need to do particular types of work that are better suited to being in person. And then we'll shift to, maybe working from home or working more independently when we have a particular type of work that requires a different type of focus. It reminds me of I think it was Cal Newport wrote this book, Deep Work, and he talked about the eudaimonia machine. I forgot who came up with that, but it's basically like a 5-room office where each space is for a different type of working, and the idea is that you would sort of progress through the spaces in the context of a day or a project. And so like the first space is very social and open, and it's meant for like collaboration and sharing of ideas. The next space is like the library, where you are exploring more independently, like the research on a particular thing. And each space kind of funnels in to be more deep thought and deep work. I think the next space was the salon, where you've socialized, then you researched, now you want to share ideas and dialogue about a particular thing. And then from there, I think you move into like, now we're going to actually produce something. And so we've got to like go real deep, focus, don't be distracted by emails, don't be distracted by WhatsApp or Slack. Do the work, like really produce quality work. And then you come out and, go back into the social space again. So I keep having conversations where people are kind of saying like, how do we use these tools in ways that actually serve us instead of being used by the tools. I think people are kind of waking up to like, they've got so many distractions that are preventing them from really doing work. Like at first the tools helped, and then there's a bit of a tool overload where now part of my day is simply managing all the information in Slack. Right?
That's usually a pretty big chunk.
It's not my job. Like it's not value added. And so I think one of the real big challenges and opportunities will be to help reorient how people engage with these technologies.
What comes up for me is it both reminds me of I think Disney had a similar structure when creating his movies, different rooms where one was pure imagination, one was more realistic, and so on.
Yeah.
This kind of process, it does connect with me in the sense, I think I'm seeing two patterns here that are just coming up for me. One connected to nature, how things in nature, there's this natural process, these natural stages of something developing and growing and eventually dying or creating something or being created into something.
Yeah.
The other thing that comes up for me is actually ceremony. That if you look back, I see this great connection between sort of hyper futuristic, high technology aspect of society emerging, blockchain and so on, AI and so on. And at the same time, I see this movement of reconnecting with nature, reconnecting with ancestral rituals and so on. And there's something to ceremony that I see at the core of human society. That I think we are actually still always doing ceremony, but in many cases we've sort of lost track of that's actually what we're doing. We have these rituals and ceremonies, and you have your coffee in the morning, and you open your email at a certain time, and you have a morning gathering, a morning meeting with everyone in the office. It's very ritualistic and ceremonial.
Yes.
Yet I believe a lot of us sort of lost touch with why we have ceremony, why we have ritual, why we create these processes of, like you're describing, the social space. We need to connect, we need to share, I need to listen inwards, I need to do all of these things, and then when we've created some sort of common space, then from there we can explore and we can start creating, and then we step out of that space into a new setting. It just comes up for me that I see a similar pattern there, and potentially that's what is about to happen in the workplace as well, is that we start looking at these rituals and start looking at the value of them, why and how. That I know we covered in the last episode, moving to why and how rather than what and who.
Yes.
Becomes almost like a ceremonial process of exploring and taking the next step into the unknown future together.
I love it. It brings up so many things for me. You just flashed me back to this idea of forgotten rituals. And so people just going through the motions. I grew up Catholic and went to a lot of masses. And I remember distinctly as a young child looking around and seeing that everybody would come to church but not take their coats off. And then they would just go through these ritualistic motions, chanting and doing, different motions. And it seemed as though all of the meaning, and I'm sure it wasn't for everybody, but it seemed as though a lot of the meaning was lost. Like it was as if the whole community of people kept going to a space, doing a thing and the incantations, but forgot why they were going to the space in the first place.
Isn't that a lot like work life in general? That how often do we actually, or not speaking for everyone here, of course, but how often do people actually think about why you're going to a job, why there are jobs to begin with? Why have we agreed that we're all doing work? What are we actually, what's the why for us as a society in doing work? And do you keep that with you when you actually go to work? Or is it just, alarm clock goes off, up, in, coffee, and so on?
Yeah, and so you're doing the rituals and going through the motions, but with a very, very divorced sense of for what purpose and how can you use it. Um, it connects me to this idea of work as a potentially fruitful place for the development of human capacity. And so, sure, work is also a paycheck. So work serves many different functions and can do that. But I think that there is an opportunity to reimagine people's jobs and their pursuits, not only as paychecks, but as places in which people freely choose to go and develop themselves, right? It's more like, I guess, community. It's like we come together to pursue this thing because we care about it. And in pursuing the thing, we get to work on different human capacities. Capacity for self-awareness, capacity for other awareness, capacity for developing my agency to bring things into the world.
Yes, and what I'm seeing when you say that is really that. And if you start looking at the workplace like that, it's a communal place for communal exploration and individual exploration, communal growth and individual growth. Something strikes me. I had a conversation over lunch a couple of months back with a friend of mine who works at one of the leading VCs, so like professional investors, tech investors primarily in Sweden. And we spoke of this organization that I'm part of creating that we won't cover here, but where we're exploring a lot of these things, both in terms of what does work, life, workspace mean for you from an individual point of view in terms of your personal growth and development, and how can that be tied into actually serving the company where you're working, and also how do we create entirely new organizational structures. What he mentioned, I was kind of surprised at first because I spoke about this and I noticed that I had a fear that he would think this was a lot of woo-woo hippie Burning Man talk.
Yes, yeah.
And because he's not from that scene,
Right.
for all I know. And he said that when I spoke of this, he said this actually makes a lot of sense because I've noticed, this is him speaking, I've noticed that in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley, where he spends a lot of time, when I go to meetings usually start with a check-in these days, which for me is commonplace now, and for a lot of people it is, and I don't think it is for everyone yet, but just that, looking at that aspect, you start a meeting by checking in with each other, like where are you, where am I, how are you feeling, what's important for you right now, this kind of very personal human way of both arriving in a place together, of being authentic and vulnerable and deepening the connection, and also getting any of that sort of energy out of the room that doesn't need to be there. It's really a ritual. It's a ceremony in a sense, which you would do in any kind of ceremonial space, whether connected to church or shamanic rituals. That's really what it is, and potentially that's our way to start reconnecting with why we're doing this through that kind of simple little ritual, checking in and checking out. Potentially that is a first step to actually moving into looking at work, looking at companies, looking at us coming together to create and make things and earn money and all of those things as communal ceremony.
Yeah, I like it. It makes me think of athletics, and I played college athletics, and there was always deep ritualistic practices to try to get yourself in a mindset so that you could perform. And so now it makes me think of all the flow state work that people are doing. Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel are two prominent thinkers in this space, and a lot of like flow state is one of those things that you can't induce. You can't just turn it on. It has this ephemeral and very challenging nature in which the more you try to get in it, the farther you are away from it. And so you can't directly get into it. But what you can do instead are create the conditions for it. Well, how do you create conditions? You have rituals. You do a breathing exercise. You have a set of maybe incantations or mantras that you go through. So there's a connection there between, for people who really want to perform well, how do you set up the conditions so that you might stumble into it? You might stumble into flow state. The other place that I think it's extremely important is kind of where we started out is, the technologies that we're using are so far beyond our ability to manage them right now. I feel like we've leapfrogged a bit the human capacity. And so we've developed all these technologies and we are being used by the tools. And so I think we have an awareness of that and we are trying to claw back our humanity and our control of the tools. And it's not to blame the tools, but it's just to have awareness that it's very, very challenging to not look at your phone. It's designed to grab your attention. It's very challenging to not get sucked into 5 Slack conversations when you're supposed to be working on the strategy piece, right? And so I feel like ritual is one of the answers, one of the touchstones to give us control back of our own system, right? Our human operating system. So one of the things I've been doing, the check-in is a wonderful place to start. I've been starting meetings with breathwork sessions. Very fast. I take people through a 3-round, 5x5 breathing exercise, and it always works. It just grounds people into the space.
Of course it does, and that's exactly to my point. Then you're progressing deeper into ritualistic design of work life, meetings, of getting together, and it's a very likely scenario that that's the way we're headed. If you just look at some of these macro trends by now, you have all of the inner work, all of the personal development work, all of the going to retreats, all of the connecting with yourself, all of having coaches and so on, where this is already commonplace. It's already in there, and it's starting to seep into other aspects of our life. Like also on a personal note, it's for a while we've had like a cell phone kindergarten, basically a box where people place their phones when they enter our home. And it's kind of a natural progression that what we're exploring in our personal life, as enough people are doing that, it's naturally seeps into every aspect of our life, including the workplace. And with that, I feel that it really brings with it's really both pushing and pulling the redesigning of the workplace, and not only the physical location, but the actual organizations that we're part of. Because from what I can see, the sort of traditional organizational designs that are most commonly still used don't really allow for this to sort of enter into them in a simple way. And that's also what I'm exploring a lot these days, is how do we design new structures of organization that moves us from the mechanistic society to the more natural, organically growing and flowing, putting us back in touch with the ecosystems that we're part of, in a sense, and also allowing for these personal exploration journeys, these personal growth journeys to be a natural part of it. So I don't feel weird stepping into the office because I've just been doing a lot of my personal work over the weekend, or I've been doing breath work exercises or check-in with my friends, and then I step into an office. it's to some extent almost as if I'm stepping back in time. So I think that shift, it's definitely already happening, and I would guess that it's just going to increase in speed over the next couple of years.
I mean, I think it's going to be a fundamental thing that organizations have to deal with, companies have to deal with. And I don't know, I think we're trying to live into the answers. Because I think we went through a whole movement which was like, hey, bring yourself to work, bring your whole self to work. And something about that was off because, well, work is work. There's actually a particular set of things that you are supposed to be doing here. There's a function and a purpose to this space, right? And so if we could take it out of work, like each space that you inhabit, each community that you're part of, there's a little bit of a different identity that you bring to it, you know? Like when I go to my jiu-jitsu gym, I'm there to practice jiu-jitsu and be part of that community. I don't necessarily talk about politics there because it's not fit for the space, right? And so I think the whole bring yourself to work thing got us a little bit off track and a little bit confused as to, well, what am I actually supposed to bring to work? And why will that be useful for me? So that, I think, is one of the open conversations that's happening now. What are you supposed to bring to work? How do we navigate that? What is the purpose of us coming together for work? And yeah, I think that's going to be a really interesting development over the next couple of years.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
What it makes me see in the moment is that, because I see that same pattern playing out on this side of the world as well, that where we've had this meaning crisis in a way, all connected to why do I live this life? Why do we have this company? Why am I doing this work? And the kind of natural response, I guess, to you starting to explore a lot of things outside of work and then feeling that work does not allow any of this. It's kind of a box and you're just floating and exploring and the world is changing so much. And then you step into this little box and it doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
And then you realize it doesn't make sense to just like break the box fully open and allow everything to just seep through, because exactly what you're saying, it has a particular purpose. I think you could even link it to, if you look at spiral dynamics and the entire teal organization trend, where you move from this centralized hierarchical structures, and then a natural phase is to sort of just say, yeah, we're not going to have any leaders, no bosses at all. It's just autonomous individuals and teams, just do whatever, because we don't want to have a man at the top pointing fingers. So we'll take him out and everybody do whatever. Yeah. And then we figure out that's probably not the end game either. Right. We do need leadership, but probably in a different kind of form. Maybe it's temporary leadership. Maybe it's, you still have the role of the leader still plays an important role. It's not about taking that out. It's about redefining what that role is and redefining the entire organization to fit with that and make the role fit the organization as well.
And how that role gets held, what would it look like to have an organization where there are multiple leaders that hold different questions and are responsible to have a different lens that they bring to the organization. And so instead of having it all be held in one head at the top, it's held in a council of 8, in which each person serves a different sort of function. Like their function is to present and represent a particular perspective.
And this also reminds me of tribes. Yes. And those kinds of structures you will find in villages and tribes of ancient times or of indigenous cultures. Yeah. It's interesting in the we are exploring a new organizational design, and within that, we're actually playing around with the idea of, instead of a board, have a council of exactly 8 roles.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So
Interesting.
it's funny that you mentioned that.
Okay.
Where we're exploring having stewardship roles. So one
Yes.
would be steward of purpose and principles. One would be the steward of the 7th generation, to have
love
that
it.
long-term perspective.
Yeah.
One would be the steward of relations, to look at everyone connected to this organization. And we're toying with the idea to have a steward of shadow, whose role is to always find the other perspective.
Oh, I like that. And the steward of shadow too makes me think of Carl Jung. So always find the other perspective, and also look at the darkness that we don't want to acknowledge, that we're bringing, so that we can try to integrate that, you know. And just be okay acknowledging that there is always darkness. It's part of us. Is the my Jungian therapist says, the trick with shadow is that if you're denying it, then you are controlled by it.
Yeah.
You know.
So how about this? Since time is flying. Okay,
Yes.
how about, as a challenge to us, and hopefully a relevant one, the next episode of the Outlook, we explore the darkness or the shadow of what we're seeing, what we're
Yes.
doing, what we believe is this bright, amazing future that definitely has a shadow with it. That would be super interesting. How do
I
you feel
love
about
it.
that?
Let's put a pin in it and do that next exploration.
Cool. So if you would spend 30 seconds to summarize what this 30 minutes gave to you, or what you bring with you out of this conversation, what would that be?
The thing that's really salient for me, that I'm going to be contemplating, is this idea of the importance of rituals in how we re-inhabit our workspaces. Because I do think there's a coming back to now, and there's we have to reimagine how we're going to play the game going forward. And I think a great place to start for that is, let's get new rituals. And so I'm going to be asking the question, what might I change? What might some new rituals be that are deliberate, and that they're ones that I remember because I've just started them, so I'm now remembering why I'm doing them. So I want to be thinking about, what are some deliberate rituals that can create meaning for me.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I would say the same thing. The ritualistic, ceremonial aspect of going to work and creating things together in a workplace really strikes me as fascinating, and something that I'm seeing. I believe that is one aspect, one perspective on what is happening, what is emerging right now. And with that in mind, I'm curious to just step into that as well, and explore, and both look, what rituals would I want to add, and also which are the current rituals that I'm perhaps not even aware of, or my team is not even aware of, that we're doing. We're just doing it for the sake of doing it. So that is something that I'll bring with me, as well as this overall shift from mechanistic to natural. This starting to look at things as organisms, and looking at the patterns you find in nature, and putting them into organizations, I think is a fascinating topic that I'd be happy to keep exploring with you.
Let's explore it. Shadow next time. I'm excited.
Shadow next time. Thank you. That's it for this episode of The Outlook, brought to you by The Absolute Company. I'm Nils. That's Bill. See you whenever the next episode is coming out.
See you next time. Bye-bye.